And everyone can hear us well. The perks of a small room. Yeah. Thank you for coming, braving the smog.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I guess we can get started.
sure. And if I start to like get lower and mumble, somebody just like do this because I have a tendency to do that. So sorry. Um, I love the genres of science fiction and fantasy because they're just ripe for allegory and metaphor and allow us to explore themes that are really relevant to today. And I really felt like Deficient delivered in that way. I loved this book. It became a real page turner for me. I thought you did a beautiful job with the world building, had a cast of diverse and interesting characters. And then maybe one of the hardest things to do with books is you tied it all together and brought it home in
To
a
finish
really
it.
yeah, yeah. In a satisfying way for the reader as well.
Yeah.
So I wasn't surprised that you won awards and were nominated for a handful of other awards.
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd like to invite you to let's jump in
Okay.
and do your first reading.
All right. So, yeah, I'll read. So, for those who don't know, Deficient takes place, I imagine it several hundred years into the future. I don't say what date it is. But it's a world where we've kind of gotten over all of the things that divide us now in terms of race, sexual orientation, gender identity, ethnicity, religion, whatnot. So we found peace in a certain way as humans, but humans have now changed in another way. They've evolved to acquire different types of supernatural abilities, let's say. So most people have changed to the degree where they've gotten this sort of enhanced ability, and there's a whole hierarchy of abilities that you can have. But the people who have not changed, who have not evolved, who have remained normal, are the ones who face the most difficulty in this futuristic world. And I was playing with that question of what would happen if this were to happen in the future, if we were to change, fundamentally as humans, how would we respond? Would we be warm and kind and caring and welcoming? Or would we do the same thing that we've always done, which is create divisions and hierarchies? And in this sense, we kind of develop it. We see a new caste system emerge in this society. So I think the main character is a 15-year-old named Ale Aragon. He is the only deficiently accelerated person. Welcome, welcome. Have a seat anywhere you like. Yeah. In his school. And he grows up in a really challenging situation. And he has one friend named Yalamba, his one best friend. And the scene that I'm going to describe is after Ale has been, quite bullied on his way to school. Like, he wakes up and all the trouble starts at his home, on the way to school, and at school. And his friend Yalamba kind of comes to the rescue and helps him out. Yalamba is kind of one rung on the ladder above Ale. So she's called freely accelerated. So if you have abilities like strength, speed, flight, levitation, telekinesis, kind of the standard things we think about, you're very much socially accepted in the society, right? You're kind of an oddball out if your ability falls out of those general categories, which is the case for the character Yalamba. And so she has a really cool ability where she can draw things, and whatever she draws, it can manifest temporarily in our reality. But a lot of people kind of underestimate it because she draws like cutesy things like puppies and cats and bunnies. So they kind of underestimate what she can do with that ability. So I'm going to start after Ale has just gotten horribly bullied on the way to school. Someone has actually thrown him on the ground, and he's kind of on the pavement and really not having a great day. A sudden boom of thunder draws my attention. A tsunami of charcoal clouds floods the sky, consuming the gray haze. I've never seen the transition happen so quickly. A giant scratch of white lightning cracks across the black clouds, and the thunder roars yet again. The rain that follows is torrential, like we're beneath a waterfall. Scheiße, Landon says, who's the bully. He tosses me to the side, and I plummet to the ground with a painful thud. I'm wet and cold. My face is pressed against the stone, and my lip is moist and tastes like copper. Splattering feet shuffle past me. No one stops to ask what's wrong or to help me up. It's not the first time I wish I could disappear like an unseen. Ale! I smile into the ground when I hear my nickname. It's not a name I hear often. In fact, There's only one person at the Academy who uses it. I push myself onto my hands and knees to see Alamba running toward me, her gray Academy skirt swishing. In one hand, she holds a glowing umbrella, its white halo repelling the rain so the canopy never gets wet. In her other hand is a sketchbook. Alejandro Aragon, Yolanda says as soon as she's at my side. She twitches her nose, a natural tic. Don't tell me you let that piece of shizer knock you down again. What was I supposed to do, Yals? Stand up for yourself. Fight back. Defend your rights. I have to laugh as she helps me to my feet. Sure, fight back against Landon. I wipe the grit from my face. Any other death wishes you want me to make while I'm at it? He's a dim-witted atlas. Your mind can dance circles around his. And he can crack my head open like a chicken egg whenever he wants. I'd prefer to keep my brain inside my skull, thank you very much. Shielding me from the rain with her glowing umbrella, Yolamba interlocks her plump arm with mine as we walk to the Academy's entrance. In the light of the spotless lobby, I notice her braids have changed to violet, matching the new color of her eyes. The day before, her hair had been a shocking pink and her eyes their usual brown. The grin on her face is wide and mischievous. You were the one who made that storm happen, weren't you? I ask. She winks a purple eye and opens her sketchbook. I see a drawing of Landon and me on the walkway. Rain pours from the sky and a bolt of lightning flashes above our heads in the picture. It isn't a good sketch, but it served its purpose. It's hard for me to suppress my smile as I think about Yolamba's ability to draw objects and scenarios into existence. She's the only feral at the Academy with that kind of talent. To the other students, she's a freak, but to me, she's magical. I'll stop there.
Yes. So, Michael, where did the idea for this world in Deficient come from?
So actually, I'm teaching a summer 8 camp here in Writers and Books this week. It's on creating heroes and villains. And one of the kids, they're 9 years old to 11 years old, one asked me, when did you start writing the book? And I was like, 2011, actually. And I was like, that was probably before you were all born. So they all started laughing. They were like, we weren't even around then. And I was like, this is how long it can take to get a book out. I was living in Honduras at the time, working for a youth empowerment organization. And I lived in Central America for several years. And I had been toying around with this idea. I really always loved the X-Men and anything that involved superpowers and superheroes. And so at the time, it felt very innovative. I know others have done this. When you take kind of the superhero world where you have a small number of superheroes who are saving the masses of normal people, I was really curious what would happen if you flipped that around and had kind of the masses be the ones who have all the abilities, and the minority population would be the normal people who do not have those abilities. And the big what if was that question of how would society respond in this type of structure? How would it be structured? And what would a young character, in this case Ale, who I imagine as kind of like one of the kids in the organization that I was working with in Honduras, how would they face that reality if they were going through some of those challenges? So I think that's where the idea came from.
Nice.
Yeah.
Interesting. So in sci-fi circles, sometimes we try to figure out what kind of nerd were you, and some of them are superhero nerds. So now I know.
I was totally, and that was like the time of a lot of dystopian. Yeah, come on in. Yeah, welcome. Come on in. We just started. Yeah. So I'm definitely a superhero nerd, and I think that was like also the dystopian literature was really popular. So that was the age of like Hunger Games and that kind of stuff. So I was kind of merging my superhero lore with an interest in dystopian worlds as well.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Now you've referred to tonight as a séance in several kind of venues. What happened to Deficient?
Yeah, so we're all part of the séance. I did not create a spell, so don't worry. we're not going to chant. But so Deficient came out in late 2023 with a press called, well, I'm not going to say. It was a small press. That press has closed over the past summer. So I was so excited because when I first was trying to get Deficient out into the world, I pitched it to agents, and I got an agent, I think, in 2014. Worked with that agency from 2014 to 2017. The agent that I was working with, we tried to pitch it to the big traditional presses. We weren't lucky to sink anything. And then that agent left the agency, and they tossed me over to another agent at that agency. And then that agent was like, yeah, send me your other stuff. Like, what have you got? So sent her some of my other stuff. And then I think a month went by, and then we had a meeting to discuss it. And she's like, oh, Michael, I just love what you sent me. It's really amazing. It's just, this is excellent. This is wonderful. And I was like, oh, what did you like about it? Everything. It's just so wonderful. It's just so amazing. It's just great. Like, who's your favorite character? All of them. They're all just so wonderful. I'm like, oh my God, you have not read a single word of what I sent you. So I had to be the one to make the decision to kind of cut the relationship with the literary agency. And that made me kind of depressed, because you kind of put all of your eggs in the basket of the agent who's representing you and hoping that you'll have, a positive outcome. And then I was living in Sierra Leone at the time. Work was really intense. COVID happened. The pandemic happened. So life kind of took over, and I kind of shelved the manuscript for a while. And then I took it back out when I moved to Kenya. I had a little bit more headspace and time to think and revisit some of my old writing, and then reworked the manuscript a bit and started pitching it, but bypassing agents, and just went to presses. And that's when I started getting bites in terms of different houses interested in wanting to publish it. So I went with one of the presses. It started off great, wonderful. Some funky things happened along the way. The press ended up closing. I got the rights back. Fought for the rights to get the rights back as well. And then I decided that I'd try to pitch it again, but I found that traditional publishers were really loath to take on something that had already been published before. So I found myself in a bit of the tricky situation of what do I do? So I'd been thinking for years around creating my own press and my own imprint, and that's what I did for this book. So basically, I'm now a publisher, a self-publisher, right? And I'm starting with my own work, because I don't want to be able to, I would love to publish other people's work down the line if this is something that is, something I'd like to do or people are interested. But I really want to learn the ropes of it first before I take on anyone's work, so I don't go through kind of some of the bumps that I went through with my own experience as well. And I'm learning a ton. It's like the learning curve is just like that. It feels like every month. So I think that's where things are going at the moment.
Tyler mentioned there are writers in the audience, so I think it is probably interesting for them to hear what kind of an arduous journey it can be.
Yeah, it was not, this is like a roller coaster of all roller coasters. So it was difficult. And I don't think, I have one friend, my friend Chad, who's just like, Michael, like most people just give up along the way, right? Like you kind of, so this whole journey of getting Deficient back out was just fighting and fighting and fighting. But I feel like now that I have the kind of the creative control with the work, because it's also, I was supposed to publish the full series with the previous publisher, and it's a series of 4 books, right? So how disappointing when the publisher closes, and then if you're struggling to get the first book republished with another press, they're not going to want to take on the full series either. So part of also taking this journey through Mintaka Press is to be able to bring out the books in relatively quick succession, since they're all written. But to do it with my own, I guess, creative style, right? So that's what I'm hoping. So the sequel will come out in October, and then hopefully 2027, 2028 will be the 3rd and the 4th book of the series.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
A lot happening, a lot going on.
We're glad that you resurrected it.
Thank you. Yeah,
Good.
I'm happy it came back to life as well. Yeah.
Would you like to read another passage for us?
Sure. So the passage that I've picked next, so basically how the ability system works, you find out by the time you're 8, your ability will manifest. So once you've hit the age of 8, it's really, you're kind of in trouble, because you're not getting an ability, right? And there are these ability specialists that you go to, so maybe they might find something that was hidden or whatever. So I think the scene that I'm going to pick is when Ale kind of goes through this experience of trying to figure out what his ability is. And Yolamba has just gotten her ability. So it was like the day before her birthday that manifested for her. And so he's kind of hopeful that something might happen for him as well. So let's see, I'll start here. The day before her 8th birthday, Yolamba grabbed my hand like she did during the dodgeball game, the way she does when she wants to make sure I know she cares. She said, "We'll always have each other, Ale, right?" I nodded, and Yolamba smiled. We hadn't played our accelerated ability adventure game, which is a game they used to play, in a long while. We couldn't bring ourselves to play the game when it seemed like we were close to being classified as deficients. We sat with each other that evening in the common area outside of my housing complex, praying to the stars and hoping something profound and eternal would answer our wishes. Fortunately for Yolanda, her wish came true that night. After returning home, she stayed up late to draw. She sketched a kitten. Shortly after adding the whiskers, she was surprised to hear a tiny meow from behind her. When she looked over her shoulder, she found a kitten identical to the one she had drawn, staring up at her with big, glossy eyes. She examined her drawing and the kitten until her mind processed what was going on. Delighted, she scooped the animal into her arms and hugged it to her chest. It was alive, it was real, and it was hers. It was the first of many animals. "You'll be next," Yolanda said when she called to tell me the news. "I know it." But as my 8th birthday neared, I still hadn't received my ability. My parents were visibly nervous. As soon as I turned 8, they brought me to an accelerated ability specialist who put me through a series of tests. For the first test, the specialist had me squeeze 2 metal bars together as hard as possible. They barely budged. Lights in the bars turned on as I applied pressure, and numbers flashed on the specialist's hollow screen. This was obviously the test for Ability S, Enhanced Strength. It was also obvious that I failed with flying colors. Ability R, or Rapid Movement Test, proved that 1, I wasn't race or material, which is the classification for those who have accelerated speed, and 2, I was slower than the average boy my age, a double hit to my rapidly waning self-esteem. For the Ability TP test, the specialist focused on a set of cards, and I had to telepathically guess the numbers he was thinking. Fail. The next test was a meditation exercise, where I had to visualize oneness, clarity, and nothingness, and I was supposed to turn invisible. Nothing happened. Scratch Ability I. During the Ability TK test, trying to telekinetically move even the smallest of objects proved impossible. While jumping on a trampoline for Ability L for levitation and flight, my stubborn, earthbound body refused to defy the law of gravity. The tests for Ability F, Yolanda's classification, were just as bad. I had to touch objects of varying textures for an extended period, sit in a dark room for an extended period, stare at a candle for an extended period, stand with my hand in a pitcher of water for an extended period, touch my hand to a hollow screen for an extended period, and look at the clouds for an extended period. Basically, I did a whole bunch of things for a long time until it was clear nothing else would happen. The specialist decided to re-examine my blood and DNA. I sat with my parents in the waiting room for another extended period as he processed the results. After about 30 minutes, the specialist came into the waiting area and called in my parents. He said he wanted to talk with them in private. I knew the only reason he would talk to them without me was as if he had bad news. 10 minutes went by, and my parents were still talking with the specialist. My insides twisted with the anticipation. Half of me wanted to know if I had an ability, but the other half could already sense something was wrong. My head felt hot, and my mind spun. Finally, the door opened. Dad, who's not my actual dad who's here, or my mom, was the first person to enter the waiting area. He didn't bother looking at me as he stomped toward the exit. Instead of waiting for the automatic sliding door to open, he punched it, shattering it to bits. I was stunned. I'd never seen him do anything like that before. Mom came out next. Her eyes were watery and her cheeks red. She took one look at me and broke into sobs. She lowered herself to her knees and gave me a hug. "No one is ever going to hurt my son," she said, weeping. I looked up to see the specialist closing his door. Apparently his work was done. Does this mean I don't have an ability? I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. Mom pulled back and stared at me with her green eyes. They weren't like my dad's or brother's coffee-colored eyes or even my aqua blue ones. She nodded. That's what the specialist said. I couldn't swallow. My face was burning. Teardrops slid down my cheeks. So what does that make me? Mom paused for a few seconds to collect her thoughts. Then she smiled, saying, "I guess it makes you Ale." Stop there.
Hearing you read tonight makes me wish I'd listened to the audiobook.
Yeah, so the audiobook is recorded. So I've recorded an audiobook. So you can get the book in paperback, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook.
Yeah.
Recorded it here at Rockfox Recording Studios, which is amazing. And yeah, and I'm going to be going in next week to record the audio for the sequel, Feral Rising.
Nice.
So yeah, recording it was a lot of fun, but its own process.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know some people here are going to be recording theirs at Rockfox as well. Yeah.
So at the heart of your book is a boy growing up believing there was something wrong with him as a psychologist and a gay reader.
Yes.
That hooked me in. But what interested you about writing about that?
The internal conflict, yeah, which we're talking about with the kids at the summer camp. Yeah, I wanted to have, and based on my own career experience, right? Like growing up, and I think where I grew up was in New Jersey, but my parents know we grew up in kind of a very conservative town. It was definitely a homophobic environment in, the 80s and 90s, especially, and I would say even the early 2000s. Gay marriage still was not a thing. Politicians weren't talking positively about anything related to homosexuality or whatever. It was a really rough go for students. There was a lot of homophobia and violence against gay kids or kids who were perceived as gay in the schools. So it was a very unsafe environment. So like for Ale, I kind of wanted to rev it up even more for what he was going through in terms of the ability classification. So I wanted him to have a lot of trouble. Unfortunately, for a character, you kind of put them through trials and tribulations, right? So I wanted him to have a really tough time at home, a really tough time at school, and a really tough time in the society at large. And I guess it can be compared to the queer experience, but I think anyone who ever in your life, and I always ask this question, anyone here in the room, have you ever felt different at any point in your life? If you don't mind, if you want to raise your hands, you can raise your hands. If you ever felt like, an outsider, a little bit different. Yeah, so pretty much everyone raised their hands, right? It could be an outsider in terms of race or ethnicity. It can be an outsider in terms of queerness. It can be, what we look like. It can be in a creative writing class and you're the one that feels like out of place because your style of writing doesn't jive with anyone else's style of writing, right? So I wanted to tap into that sense of otherness through Ale's story, and really dial up the challenges he was facing, but also to give glimpses of hope in his life through his best friend Yolamba. He has a really positive relationship with his mother, but there isn't too much else in his life that is giving him goodness, I suppose. So what would this type of character become like? How does he respond? How does he act? And how does this type of character have agency was probably the trickiest part in writing the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your approach to that? I mean, he was
Yeah.
so powerless. It was so heartbreaking in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you think of stories like, I always go to I think of Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games, right? Who is just like agency to the wazoo, right? Has the bow and arrow, defends her sister, and is out there fighting in the Hunger Games, is very athletic. And I'm like, wow, so it's kind of nice to write about a character who you can just throw into the Hunger Games and write a whole story, 3 books or more about that character. So for Ale, it was a bit trickier because he is not confident. He is trying to hide himself because if he draws too much attention to himself, he'll be bullied. He has one friend, Yolamba, who's super strong, right, and is always there to defend him. But part of the challenge is that in the book, Yolamba ends up disappearing in a hate crime against her ability type. So the rock in Ale's life is removed. So he basically has to figure out what has happened to my best friend. He's blamed for it. And he has to clear his name and figure out what happened to Yolamba before it's too late without having an ability. So in a sense, the challenge for him is that he has no choice but to do this. Otherwise, he's not going to be able to find his friend. Right. He has to overcome these insecurities. And that sort of voice inside that's saying, you're not good enough, you are deficient, and that means you are inherently bad, right? Which is what he's grappling with.
Yeah. You talked about, just in talking about the book, all the different places you've lived, you've had this kind of global education, so to speak. Yeah. And I thought you did a really nice job of delivering on a really diverse cast of characters in a way that felt really natural. I've read books where it felt like the author was trying too hard to kind of wedge a different kind of person in here and there. Why was that important to you?
Yeah, I didn't want it to feel like a tick box exercise either. Like sometimes when we see movies, it feels like tokenistic. But schools, it depends on your setting, but schools can be quite diverse, right?
Right.
And even growing up, I think my school had its diversity. I think it's a more diverse town than it was. I do come from a mixed race household, so my dad is proudly Mexican. My mom is from New Jersey. I think more European background. So I wanted the protagonist to have a Latinx identity in this futuristic world. But I also didn't want the futuristic world to be the world that was defined by maybe the identities that define us now. But I try to draw inspiration on the different characters of actual friends that I have. Yolamba is, because I had so much time to revise the book over the years, Yolamba is my best friend from Sierra Leone, right? She was my finance manager during the Ebola crisis and all of our Ebola programming and all the programming that we did through COVID. And she's from Sierra Leone, has a mixed background of being in Sierra Leone in the UK. So I kind of talked with her as well, of like, Yolamba, can I actually use your name as one of the characters in this book? And she was like, totally, I'm so excited about that. That'd be amazing. And I had an artist who also helped draw some of the characters. So when I do events with kids, I have these trading cards that I pass out. And so Yolamba got to kind of design her hair and the style and what the character looked like. And so that was a lot of fun. But I drew the character of Yolamba also from childhood best friends as well. The person who I dedicated the book to, Tara, was my best friend from second grade. So I actually inserted elements of that friendship into the character, actual memories that we had, made it into the book. So it is a work of fiction, right? But you can draw from your own elements of your own life to try to make the character seem a little bit more real. There's the character Gwen, who has 4 abilities. So she's a legion, and she's the most powerful student in the school. So my parents will know my friend Kelly, who was a gymnast. She could do backflips. She was a cheerleader. She was just like muscle, she was just this fantastical being. And I was like, okay, that's Gwen. That'll be that character. So of course they have differences. Their personalities don't always necessarily match up, but I tried my best to draw from reality where I could.
Okay, that's really interesting. I've always kind of wondered about that in fiction. How could you not?
Yeah.
But so you checked it out with a couple of them.
With a couple of them. And then some characters just emerged by themselves. Like there's a character, Kazuki, who's this kind of quirky character who appears. And like I didn't plan him. I didn't plan him in any outlining or anything like that. But there's this another bullying scene where I needed a character like Kazuki to kind of emerge. And he can read people's minds, but he struggles with reading people's minds. He can't really he's not always sure if he's talking to you or reading your mind kind of thing. So he messes everything up and he blurts out what you're thinking. And so he gets into a lot of trouble and no one wants to be his friend because of that. Even though he has 2 abilities, he can also turn invisible. So in a sense, Ale kind of gathers these kind of group of oddballs who are, maybe they have abilities, but they struggle with them in a way. Or Gwen having 4 abilities is seen as kind of a lone wolf and kind of people are almost intimidated by her, and she's kind of off in her own world doing her own thing. So he needs to assemble this kind of outcast friends to be able to solve the mystery in time.
Which is a really touching part of the book for me as he begins to kind of develop a crew. Yeah, you can find it's found family, right?
That's right. And he does struggle to find that at home. He struggles to find it at school. So it's kind of nice where you see him having to do that because by himself he realizes I can't do this alone. This is much bigger of a problem than I can solve. So how does he rally the troops to do this?
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like part of my job is probably managing the time. So would you like to read a third passage for us?
The third one is pretty short, I think. Okay. So this is just a scene where, the troops have been rallied. So Ale is hanging out with Gwen, who can fly, and she has super strength and super speed, and she can move objects with her mind, so she can do it all, right? And Kazuki, who's the little quirky guy who blurts everything out.
We like Kazuki.
Yeah, we love Kazuki. And kids especially, he's always the favorite character. So they're going to one location, and Gwen is actually lifting them both up, and they're flying to get to that location. So this is the first time Ale has ever experienced flight before. So we leave the Achewan Green and head to the factories, not by shuttle bus or on foot, but by Gwen. She holds onto us tightly, me with her left arm and Kazuki with her right. Sky gliders, which is what they're called, make flying seem so easy, but it is probably the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. Gwen doesn't prepare us for it. There are no demonstrations, instructions, or warnings in case of an emergency. We're just up and zooming. Everything below us shrinks so fast it makes my stomach churn. I squeeze my eyes shut and hope I won't slip from Gwen's grip. Don't worry, Ale, Kazuki shouts. His voice carries over the cold rush of sky-high wind. It's going to be okay. Okay, my culo. One wrong move and I'll fall for miles until I splatter into an unrecognizable puddle. Take a deep breath, he yells. That's right, in and out, in and out. I can't breathe, Kazuki. Yes, you can. From the diaphragm, Gwen chimes in. I grunt at her instruction, but I have no choice. I suck in the air and hold it in until it feels like my lungs might burst. When I finally let go of my breath, my heartbeat slows, and the clamminess disappears from my hands. I open my eyes slightly to peek at the world around me. Look straight ahead, Kazuki says. I open my eyes fully and see a beautiful dusk sky. The sun is only a few inches above the hilly horizon. The blue of the sky is darkening as evening creeps upon Achuan. I know I'm not supposed to look down, but I've never seen the hills and fields at this angle before. I am seeing all kinds of things in a completely new way. The narrow highways are blue veins conveying tiny specks of vehicles. The farms are shaped into perfect quadrilaterals. I see the dense woods and the dark towering form of the abandoned chapel. I can even see the academy. It looks so small nestled next to the massive Achuan Lake. I love how minuscule it is from up here, a mere blip on the landscape. Now that I've risen above a fear I didn't know I had, the sensation of flying through the sky without limits transforms into a total rush. This is what it must feel like to soar like an eagle. I spread my arms out, pretending they're wings, and laugh, and laugh. I can't stop. Tears slide from the corners of my eyes across my temples. This is the sensation of undiluted freedom. I haven't had so much fun in a long time, yet I feel guilty for each laugh, each wave of exhilaration rushing through me. Each second I delight in the multicolored sky, the setting sun, and the green hills. I don't deserve any of this. Not when Yolamba is gone. Stop it there. Yeah.
You deal with a lot of heavy kind of concepts in this book, from bullying to really, what I think is just the abusive relationship from Ali's, father and brothers, hate crimes. And yet you're writing for a young adult audience. So I'm just curious. I mean, there's a lot of responsibility in that.
Yeah.
And I was really getting hooked in it. I found myself, even though I kind of understand abusive relationships, and that it takes a lot of years to sort that out, that I was still almost a little disappointed that, he seemed eager to kind of take his father and brothers back.
Yeah.
Which I think is realistic, but difficult.
Yeah, and no spoil. Well, I'll try not to spoil anything. But I don't think the end ends on necessarily a positive note with Ali's family. So, yeah, I'm not going to give away any of the ending. But I think it leaves us on a point where Ale has also made some mistakes, and I think recognizes that through the story of, the first people he's going to blame are the people that have been the meanest and cruelest to him. And I think he realized that when he starts blaming people in his mind, when he finds out that he's wrong, he feels sorry for it, right? And so he realizes that he's made some mistakes. And I think at the end, there definitely is some unspoken tension between Ale and his family members. It feels better than it was when the book first started, perhaps. But there's also kind of this idea of tolerance as opposed to, maybe embracing an actual love.
Yeah.
And I think in Feral Rising, in the book, the family dynamics rev up much more. So I don't think, I wouldn't say it's a happy ending in Deficient in that sense, and it's going to get unhappier.
Okay, all right.
Sadly.
Well, that kind of answered the question, what's next? You've laid out that there's a 4-book series.
Yeah.
You've got kind of planned publication dates on those, and that we can expect.
Yeah. So October 15th this is Feral Rising is the sequel. So people will have there are little bookmarks around, and you can learn more about Feral Rising if you want to learn more about it. So that will come out October 15th. It takes place a few months after the Deficient story, so we're still very much in this cast of characters. something horrible happens to Ale in Deficient, right? And so what we're doing in Feral Rising is following up and grappling with that horrible thing that happens to him, and if and how he can overcome it. And it has ripple effects not just for him in his life, but actually for the entire school and all of society, right? So Feral Rising has a lot to grapple with that. So we're a little bit
Yes.
outside of the home, outside of the school. We see a little bit more beyond in the fuller picture of the world. And I think was an exciting thing to write about. And then the books keep going. So 4 books total. So my hope is to get the third one out in 2027 and the fourth one out in 2028. They're all written, and I'm revising the last book as we speak, and have to hand that over to the editor that I work with in 5 days. I don't know why I decided to do like summer rate camp and this event at the same time and give myself that deadline, but I did. But anyway, it's all happening. It's going to happen.
Excited to read book 2.
Yeah.
Shall we open it up and take some questions from the audience?
Yes, I'd love it. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, so I'm a little curious. When you started writing the books, did you have an idea of the marketplace and where your book might fit in? Because I know there's, like, especially in YA, there's middle grade, there's like a lot of small differences between the markets. And did you have to figure that out? And then did you have to do some rewriting to make it fit, somewhere where you didn't necessarily think it was going to go?
Yeah, there was definitely yeah, I was interested in books that had treated like Hero. I'm trying to think about some other ones that were out that had superpowers in them, and treated superpowers in a certain way. And I could see myself maybe approaching that in a different way with the book that I was writing. TJ Klune, for instance, is another writer who's written several books with characters who actually have supernatural abilities. A lot of the things I was reading, like it would be like superheroes who had capes and stuff and costumes, and it was like superheroes. So it was also difficult to communicate that this is not necessarily what I'm after in terms of that type of genre, or even like mutants, that type of thing, like X-Men, even though it was a flip and an inverse on X-Men in certain ways. But that it was almost felt I wanted to feel very normalized, that, the abilities and these powers were very much a part of people's day to day. There's actually an Irish television series that came out a few years ago called Extraordinary, which is, I think, people in their 20s, and it's the same idea of everyone has a superpower. It's kind of low budget, and like someone, like punches their hand in the wall and gets it stuck, and like it plays on this idea of a couple and one has super strength, and like they're making love, and that she breaks her hips or whatever, and it's a comedy, right? So it's all like, okay, the ripple effects of having superpowers and what that can do, like with people in their 20s who are trying to discover themselves and their sexuality. So yeah, I think I was trying to figure out how that would work, and then I think more for getting like getting the agents interested wasn't so hard. And then I guess maybe traditional publishers, and I've met agents and publishers who are like, don't send me anything with superpowers. I don't want, it's not selling. I don't want to deal with it. So in a sense, it's like, okay, so do you wait for the trend to change, or do you not? And, now I'm in a position where I can put it out as I want to put it out myself. But yeah, it went through many iterations with also feedback even from the small presses of, hey, can you do this, this, and this? And I was always willing to try to see if it would make the manuscript stronger. And it usually did when I listened to people's advice that I got. So yeah, hopefully that answered that. Yep.
Michael, thank you so much, because I don't know, I know you say this is just fiction.
Yeah.
This seems very, very real in Colombian culture, that I'm Colombian and my parents are also Colombian. And it's like so much related. I don't know if you see the movie like Encanto.
Yes.
It's also related about like the powers that in the family each member is going to have, but it's also more relevant with indigenous culture in Colombia. Like I was having like the fortune to work with many of them, and also each of the tribes, they try to let kids when they are very young to discover what are their like interests, and what are they more like able to do?
Yeah.
Like what are their superpower? Like in this way.
Yeah.
Like for being helpful for the community and the collectivistic way to maintain the culture, the community, and for help each other. So my question is more like, how much of that research, because I know you also have like the Latin experience, you also want to be integrated a little more in the book, but like how much of this is also part of research? I know it's also life experience, but also this feels like very real in a normal life for a young people in Latin America.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, because this takes place so long into the future, I was also trying to imagine like what would culture look like then, and how would people engage with one another? What would their, would they have the same identities that we have now? And I wanted it to feel really different. It's also like Ale talks about this great catastrophe that has happened several years before. There's this great super volcanic just, explosion in the Western world. It's post-climate change, so climate change has happened and it's had its ripple effects. The entire world structure has changed. There are no more nation states, so we don't identify as Colombian or American anymore, right? But there's still all these people. And the society is actually split into grid. It's a gridded system, and you're kind of locked into the grid that you're in, and you're not able to kind of escape that, like leave that grid. So immigration isn't happening, right? So Ale is just kind of really restricted in his little own prefecture and world, and living and working in that kind of environment. So in a way, it was not necessarily research, but a lot of thinking about what could the society look like. And even things like they curse a lot in the book, like they're swearing, but they're swearing in other languages. So they're almost like using foreign languages as loan words for the cursing that happens in all different types of languages that manifests here. And I kind of wanted something special of like how would kids communicate with each other who are in their teenage years, but in a creative way that might feel a little bit more, I don't know, nuanced, if that's the right word. But thanks for asking that. Hopefully that helped, answer that. Any other questions? Yeah.
So I haven't had the chance to read this yet because you sold out festival, but now I have it in my own hands. So I was interested as you were talking about sort of the X-Men and how, I'm sorry to go down a superhero thing, but like they're mutants, they're looked down on by society. And now this is sort of the inverse, as you said. And now the people who don't have, so it's like this study of sort of how our society, if you lack something or you're the minority of something, they look down on you. How did you approach that for, I mean, it's a YA, you're not going all the way down to like middle grade, but how did you think about that in terms of writing for?
And just to say about X-Men, even though they're these mutants that have these super abilities, right? What I've always loved about X-Men is that, the majority of humans do look down upon them and are frightened by them. There's definitely a queer allegory with the X-Men's storytelling. So I was always drawn to that as a child, not necessarily knowing what I was watching or why I was drawn to it, but that was really at the core of it. And so I think I posted the other day on social media, like the first time there was a Storm doll in the Toys R Us. Like I remember going to Toys R Us and it was always like Cyclops and Wolverine and like Iceman, and I was just waiting for like a female action figure to come, and finally Storm came, and I just looked at it. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And I was with my grandmother, and she was like, do you want that? And so she bought it for me. But I remember being like afraid to like, I didn't want my dad to see me playing with it. And my dad is here and has autographs. My dad is a professional wrestler, so he wrestled for the WWE for many, many years. So people can also get autographs when, later on, if you like wrestling or know someone who likes wrestling. I asked if my dad could bring autographs. But growing up, I also felt like this little boy, like wrestling was like this big thing. My dad was this big, he still is a big wrestler, right? Super athletic, super sporty. My dad knows how horrible I was at sports growing up, like the worst of the worst. Like I would shoot in the wrong basket in basketball, right? And then miss, and he was my coach. And I was just like, it was like this level of masculinity that I was like never, ever, ever going to reach in my mind. And then now that I'm older, I'm like, don't offend, like, but wrestling is kind of like the gayest thing ever, right? it's like boots and Speedos, and they're like wrestling each other. Everyone's hot and sweat. And I'm like, okay, like maybe I wasn't so far off, right? And I think my dad and I have had more nuanced conversations around wrestling in the industry and that type of thing. But it was this idea of growing up and feeling different as a young person. This idea of what you can't be or what you never imagine yourself becoming, and channeling a lot of that energy into the character. in a way that felt realistic and kind of a mishmash. It was like, okay, I'll throw some X-Men in there. I'll throw some wrestling in there. I'll throw some of myself in there. I'll throw some of my family dynamics in there. I'll throw some of my school in there. I paralleled it after like a mother, a father, and three boys, right? That was my family structure. So I think that combination of fiction plus reality plus imagination was what helped me do that. Welcome. Come on in. Yeah. Feel free to sit. Yeah. Sit up there. Yeah. Did that answer your question? I don't know. I feel like I went on a big tangent there, but yeah. Are there any other questions? Yeah. Brian.
I'm curious whether recording the audiobook taught you something about the story that you didn't know before. Because in that context, you're having to give voice to some of the characters.
Yeah.
Yourself. Did you learn anything about the characters that surprised you or something different just through that process?
That's a great question, and I think the first audiobook was actually recorded by a voice actor through the previous publisher. So when I got the rights to the book back, I also got the rights to the original audiobook back. But because I wanted to make changes to the manuscript, I had it copy edited again. I cleaned up things. I made some small tweaks because I had then written much more of the series and wanted to go back and kind of insert some things to, just make it. It's kind of nice when you go back to the first book and then you get to the fourth book and you're like, oh, that appeared there, or little hints of things. And then going over the audiobook in my own voice, it was that challenge of trying to find the voice of each of the characters in my own way. And I love what the original voice actor did. I did make some changes in my own way to some of the characters, but I could also connect with the characters more around their own journey, their own insecurities, in a way that I hope comes across as compelling in the audiobook journey. Of course, I found like little things. Like the nice thing about recording an audiobook before you publish your book is you find the little errors. Like I think there were 5 mistakes. I was like, okay, good. I've read the whole thing, so we could find those mistakes. But what I love are some of the hints that I was able to insert in the book, and I can see some of those hints playing out that will then manifest in book 2, book 3, and book 4. And I can see like the first book is the origin story, right? So you see where the characters are then, and they're going to go through craziness over the course of the 4-book series. But I can understand why they behave the way they do, and not only in this book, but in future books, because of, I think, that journey of trying to find and express them in their voice. It's told in Ale's first-person perspective, so I feel like his voice can sound very much like mine, but then when you bring another character into the equation, you want them to sound different. Yeah. Any other questions?
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Is there a difference between ego and identity?
That's a great question. Like the psychological ego, id, ego, superego, or one's ego as how they.
I'm concerned with people with identities might be overly ego.
Okay. Like, yeah. So I think that happens. So yeah, in the beginning of the book, there's a list of the ability types, and the ones who have the common abilities, especially super strength. You kind of think of like the jocks in high school. So they're called atlases. They have super strength. They're kind of at the top of the hierarchy. People who have super speed, and they hang out in cliques. So I think those are the ones who tend to be bullying people like Ale or people like Yolamba. So there definitely is ego. The cool thing I like about Yolamba is that she doesn't care. She just will say whatever she thinks, and she will speak out, and she kind of serves as a model for Ale of what to do. But she then has the backing of her own ability to kind of help protect her, whereas Ale doesn't. So if he speaks out, and there are times he does, right? And he's learned even as a young child, whenever he speaks out, you get into trouble. So the first time he did that, he pretty much gets brutally beaten up. In front of his brothers and in front of people who he thought were his friends. So I think there definitely is a lot of ego that plays into how people relate to the protagonist. Yeah.
I think that's probably a good place to begin to put a pin in this. It's been a lovely conversation. I appreciate so much the honor of letting me be a part of it. And I will give you the closing words so we can stay on our time marks.
Yeah.
book signing.
Well, I want to put a plug for the Rochester Science Fiction Book Club. Maybe Craig, can I turn it back over to you? The pin is out. Can you talk about the book club quickly?
I think the book club is, suffering from success. We have a
Yeah,
pretty robust membership now.
which is great. Okay.
Yeah, I just started it in Columbia, Missouri, with a buddy to kind of when we were together, we would end up talking about science fiction. So we're like, let's just do a book club. And so I always just try to encourage people kind of just do it. And so when I moved 1,000 miles to the east, that was like a real loss. So
Yeah.
just started with a couple of friends, and then they invited a couple of friends and a couple of friends, and so
Yeah.
just keeps us reading science fiction every month.
Cool. And I know it meets tomorrow, and I know you have plenty of members, but if anyone is interested, just let us know. And I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time. I know there was a lot of smog out there, and you have many other things to do on a summer evening, but I really appreciate you coming to Writers and Books. I have tons of bookmarks. There are books in the bookstore. I'll go downstairs, and I think we do probably signings on the first floor, Sally, thinking probably. And we have cookies, we have drinks, we have juice, we have cupcakes. So please feel free to help yourself to snacks. And yeah, happy to have you here. Anything else?
Michael?
Yeah. Thanks.